You're listening to the weekly Parsha podcast recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramah Beit Shemesh Israel 5776, 2015. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Toldos. The Torah tells us about Isaac. He marries Rebekah. Yitzchak and Rivka get married. They have these two children. They have Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau. And these two children, at the beginning of their lives, as our Chazal tell us, as they explain in the Pesukim, they look exactly the same. They seem the same. They're doing all the same things. But at a certain point in time, and our Chazal say, the time was specifically the death of Abraham, when Avram Avinu passed on from the world. Their paths diverged, and they started to go in two different ways. Esav started to go on the way which wasn't so good, which indeed involved much sin and distance from Hashem, distance from God, and goodness. Yaakov stayed on the path which was proper. The Torah continues to tell us the story how Yitzchak, he was blind. He was unable to see. And not just in a physical sense, but as it's clear from the verses, he was unable to see in a deeper sense. He was unable to see the fact that Esau was doing things that were wrong, that he wasn't doing the right thing, that the Avodas Hashem that he had, the service of God that Esau was showing to his father was indeed just surface level. It wasn't real, it wasn't deep. It was just to try to impress. Yaakov Avinu, however, was someone who was doing it in a much deeper way, in a sincere way. And Rebekah, was able to sense that and to see. She had a prophecy indeed, that the greater of the two would be the younger one, would be Jacob. And because she knew that Yaakov was the greater one, and there was a depth to his service of Hashem, so therefore she encouraged the younger one to indeed take those blessings away from his older brother. And we'll get more into that a bit soon, that whole story of the stealing of the blessings. But before we do, I'd like to share with you a medrash, and the medrash is Tzarech Bir needs explanation. And I think that with a Yesod, an idea which I heard from my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Per, we can understand what's going on in this medrash. The medrash says, "Vatechena einav mera'os," that the eyes of Isaac became heavy from seeing, meaning he wasn't able to see. He got old, his vision became clouded. Amar Elazar ben Azariah, Elazar ben Azariah says, "Mera'os bira, mera'os biraseh shel rasha." He lost his vision because Hashem caused him to lose his vision so that he not be able to see the evil of his son. He had a son, his name was Esav. He was doing acts of evil. Hashem didn't want him to have to see this. So he lost his vision. Now, the Medrash is going to say there's something different about this, or deeper than this. Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu. Hashem said, why am I making him lose his vision? Isaac is going to go out to the marketplace. People will say, look, this is the father of that Russia, that evil person, Esav. So it's going to reflect poorly on Yitzchak, who's the father, who raised this man. So Hashem said, I'm going to cause him to lose his vision. And he'll have to stay at home. And this way, no one will say anything negative about Yitzchak. So a reference to this concept is in the verse in Mishlei, in Proverbs chapter 28, verse 28, that when the evil ones arise, a person should hide. So the idea is that Yitzchak was led to hide. He wasn't able to see, so he would be left at home. And this way, the evil that Esav would perpetrate wouldn't reflect on him. So, this is the first part of the Medrash, and of course it needs beer. What does that mean? Hashem made him blind so that people, this is a great tzaddik, Yitzchak Avinu, the son of Avram Avinu. What, they forgot about all the good things that he's done? They're only going to look at that because he has a son named Esav? It seems very strange. Why is this going to be the reflection on Yitzchak? This is Esav. Esav makes his choices. Why is it a reflection negatively on Isaac? The Medrash goes on to say that we find from here that whenever a person has a student or a son who's a Rasha, this is the type of thing that happens. His eyes become blinded. We're going to skip a little bit and read onwards. The Medrash says another idea which is very interesting and certainly needs biurs, it needs understanding. Davar acher, another explanation, mera'os, his eyes became unable to see. Why did he lose his vision? It was because of something that he saw before. It was because of something that he looked at before. At the time when Abraham tied his son Isaac onto the altar, the angels were crying. And when they cried, what happened? The tears went out of their eyes, into the eyes of Isaac. And they had an effect on his eyes. And when he became old, his eyes, the effect that had happened so many years before at the Akedah, it took hold and he lost his vision. That's what it means when he became old. So this Midrash also needs explanation. Why were they crying? I mean, Malachim, they're crying because he's about to be killed. What they don't know that it's the tzivui of Hashem, it's the command of God, and then in the end everything's going to be fine. Why are they crying? What does it mean? First of all, why are they crying? And second of all, what does it mean it's falling into his eyes? What's the idea here? Everything here, every nuance, every word in the Midrash is carefully chosen. What do Chazal mean with this idea? Now there's another part of the Midrash. What does it mean? He lost his eyes became heavy from seeing. What's this mean? There was another thing that he saw besides, perhaps, for the tears that fell into his eyes of the angels. There was something else. At the time when Abraham tied up Isaac on the altar, he was looking up. And right behind Abraham was the divine presence. It was there. It was an unbelievable manifestation of God in the world. Yitzchak looked at something he shouldn't have looked at. The Eitz Yosef says, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sees the divine presence at the sneh, the bush is burning, he turns away. He doesn't want to look. Yitzchak should have done the same thing. He didn't do that thing. So because he did that, because he looked at the Shekhinah, because he looked at the divine presence, therefore he lost his vision. The Medrash gives us an analogy. What's this comparable to? Lamelech, to a king. That he was going around in the courtyard of his palace. He looks around. He sees that one of his closest friends, the son of his closest friend, is looking out of the window at him. Here he is. He's in the privacy of his own home, the king, and someone's looking at him. Someone's looking. It's inappropriate. Omar, so the king says, if I'm going to go, this is a treasonous act the person has done, looking down at me. I'm here. I am in my private area. No one should be looking at me. If I go and I kill him right now, so that's going to have a negative effect on the one who I love, on my dear friend. This is his son. I can't do that. So the king decides that instead he's going to close those windows, to board them up, and this way he won't be able to see. This way the son of the king won't be able to see. In the same way, when Abraham had tied his son on the altar, so Yitzchak looked at something that he shouldn't have looked at. Avram was the beloved of God. It seems that Isaac, him being there, him doing this, it was an amazing thing, but it didn't entitle him to view the Shekhinah, to view the divine presence. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so Hashem said, if I'm going to kill him, I'm going to affect negatively my beloved Abraham. The very eyes that were looking, those eyes are going to become blinded. When he became old, and I'm adding this in, it doesn't say it's beferish in the Medrash, but this point in time was, when did all the Risha begin? When did all the evil begin? It was when Abraham died. So when Abraham disappears from the scene, so to speak, so that's when all of this stuff begins to happen. That's when Yitzchak loses his vision. Now we need to understand as we read this, what is the idea? What exactly was going on at the Akedah? How come Yitzchak can't look? Why does Yitzchak have to turn away? What is the idea? Abraham didn't have to turn away. Abraham was there too. Doesn't say he lost his vision. Doesn't say he didn't. There was no problems with Abraham. And so, what was the problem? Where was the chisaron? Where was the lack in Yitzchak that caused him to lose his vision? What was he looking at? What does it mean that he was looking at the divine presence that was there? What was the chisaron? What was the lack in that act? Now, before we answer this question, all these questions, I'd like to share with you another point in the Parsha, which I heard from my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yechiel Per of Yeshiva Far Rockaway. He pointed out that if we look at the verses that speak about the stealing of the blessings, so Yaakov Avinu is directed by his mother. His mother, as we said, Rivka Imenu had a nevuah. She had received a prophecy through Shem and Ever, through the yeshiva, through her asking this question as to what's going on inside of her, why are these babies moving around so much. And she was told through a spiritual ultrasound, so to speak, that there are two different nations inside of her. The greater one is the younger one, which is Yaakov, which is Jacob. And the older one is not going to be as great. Now, so Rivka knew this. Rivka understood this. And when it came time for the blessings, Isaac was ready to give those blessings. The Bechira, which represented the spiritual legacy, the Jewish people, everything that the Jewish people stand for was going to be given to Esav, who was not the righteous one, who was not the greater one. And so Rivka told Yaakov to go. And in fact, Yaakov, when you read the Psukim, it's very clear that Yaakov was extremely reluctant to do this. I'm going to take the brachas. What's going to be? My father will see that I'm a liar, that I'm a faker, that I'm a fraud. And Rivka says, no, it's me. She says, if there's any klala, if there's anything negative that comes out, it's going to be sent my way. It's not going to be it sounds like it's not going to be your achrayus. It's not going to be your responsibility. And so she goes and she dresses him. My Rosh Hashiva pointed out, it's very clear in the verses. She directs the whole entire affair, the whole entire business. The pasuk in chapter 27, verse 15. Vatikach Rivka's bigdei Esav bena hagadol hachamudais. Rebecca takes the clothes of Esav, asher ita baboyis, vatal meishes Yaakov ben Hakoton. She dressed him. She dressed Jacob. He wasn't so young here. He was a man. She dressed him, and it goes on to say, and she gave him the food, and and then he comes in. But what happens later on? So the verses say later on, Rosh Hashiva pointed out that Rivka hears through Ruach HaKodesh, as Rashi says, that after this whole story, after Yaakov, after the events transpire, that Yaakov takes the blessing, so Esav is upset. Esav wants to kill Yaakov. He wants to destroy Jacob for what he's done. So in chapter 27, verse 42, it says, "Vayugad Rivka divrei Esav ben Hagadol." She finds out, "Vatishlach vatikra Yaakov." She calls to Jacob ben Hakoton, her younger son. "Vataymer love," and she says, "Hine Esav achicha mislachin lachal hargecha." He wants to kill you. "Vata bini shema b'kali," listen to me. "V'kum b'rachacha lavan achi harana." Go run to my brother Laban. "Yeshavti ma yomim achodim. Ad asher toshuv chamas achicha. Ad shuv af achicha mimcha." You're going to wait there. You're going to wait there until your brother's anger abates from you. And he will forget what you did to him. No, what you did to him? This is Rivka talking. Rivka's the one who directed the whole story, like we said. Yaakov was kind of just going along with it. What does she mean by that? He's going to forget what you did. I mean, she should say what we did or what I did. Why does she say to him what you did? My Rosh Hashiva said an amazing, and deep, important, essential yesod, a foundational idea when it comes to Yiddishkeit, when it comes to our approach to service of God. When I do something, and I believe it's the right thing to do, and someone is pushing me in that direction, ultimately the achrayus, the responsibility for that choice, for that action is mine. I am the one who needs to take the responsibility. I need to also know how to think for myself. I need to understand. Of course, I need to make the right choices, but I need to learn how to think for myself. What is Hashem's will? What does Hashem want from me? Yes, I can ask advice. Yes, I can turn to others and say, what's the right thing to do? But I'm the one who ultimately is going to have to give a din v'cheshbon. I'm going to have to come in front of God and give an accounting. Why did I choose this? Why indeed did I do this act? What was the reasoning behind it? Rivka is telling Yaakov Avinu an amazing thing. It's what you did. It's true that I was the one who dressed you. It's true I gave you the food. It's true I gave you the advice. But you're the one who did it. Ultimately, it was your choice. It comes down to who you are and the choice that you made. It's a big yesod. It's very important to understand. We are responsible for our choices in our service of God. We are responsible. Whatever we do, the choices we make are ours. Very powerful idea. Now, so why am I sharing this? What does it have to do with the midrashim that we spoke about earlier? What comes out is, when we look at the Akedah, when we look at the binding of Isaac and the amazing sacrifice, whose sacrifice was it? Whose great act was it? Was it Abraham's act? Or was it Isaac's act? Was it Avram Avinu or was it Yitzchak? And it seems very clear from this medrash that the one who was doing the great accomplishment was Avram. It makes a lot of sense too. You think about it, this was either the 9th or the 10th of the Nisyanis of Avram Avinu, of Abraham. He had spent his lifetime serving God, facing off with challenges. This was the apex, the pinnacle, the final act of his greatness. This is what he worked at and he got to through a lifetime of work and sacrifice and walking through challenges. Yitzchak was a young man at the time. He was 37 years old. He was a young man. He hadn't gone through his whole life. He was going to live many, many, many years after the Akedah. It's the beginning of his service of God. But it's not the end. It's not close to the end. And it's not even something that he's choosing on his own. He's coming there. He's following his father. His father said, let's go. We're going on a journey, a spiritual journey. We're on our way. And Yitzchak says, okay, great. I'm coming. Whatever you say, Dad, I'm ready to do it. If this is what you believe is what God wants, I'm ready to do it. But it didn't come out of his own choice so much. When we look at what Rivka says to Yaakov, and she's saying to him, you did this. You did this. Yes, I pushed you, I led you to it, but you did it. With Yitzchak Avinu, with the Akedah, it seems clear that the who did the Akedah, it was really more Avraham. It was really more Avraham. And so what happens when the person, instead of making his own choices, instead of it being about me choosing to serve God, it's the result of other people's choices? So then the person doesn't own his service of God. He doesn't really he hasn't accessed that connection yet. Yitzchak wasn't holding on the level of Avram Avinu. And I believe that that's part of the pshat. We asked, what does it mean that he looked at the Shekhinah? It was inappropriate for him to look at the Shekhinah. He was looking at the king. What about Abraham? Why? He didn't do anything. He doesn't seem like he had any issues with looking at the Shekhinah. He was also there. And I think that the pshat is because Avraham had reached this level on his own. He had chosen it. Yitzchak he hadn't fully developed his koyach habechira yet, his choosing yet. It wasn't something that was coming from inside of himself. And I think that that's part of the pshat, why the malachim are crying. What does it mean that they're crying? What's their sadness? And why is it blocking his vision? So I was thinking about this, and the pasuk that the Medrash brings is, there's a pasuk in Isaiah, in Yeshaya chapter 33 verse 7, which we see that they're crying, that the malachim are crying, these messengers or the angels are crying, because they came to a place, they were looking for peace, but they found that the place had been destroyed. So when you look at the Akedah, what are they crying about? What are they sad about? And I was thinking, what could be that they were sad about? That as a result of the Akedah, there was an amazing spiritual explosion. Yitzchak wasn't able to have a child before, as the Zohar says, as our Chazal tell us. And why? Because he didn't have that spiritual accomplishment. He had the wrong soul. As a result of him being brought on the Akedah, the binding, so a new soul came into him, and Rivka was born at that point, and they were able to get married, and they were going to have children. But the result also was that they were going to have Esav. There's an amazing spiritual accomplishment here, but within the spiritual accomplishment is something negative, and they're crying about that, because there's going to be an Esav. And you know who Esav is? Esav takes this idea. Yitzchak hadn't chosen the Akedah. He just was doing it because that's what his father said. He hadn't fully taken that responsibility on himself. Esav, all the things that he does, he says, how do I take meiser off of salt? All of the things that he's talking about and he's trying to do are just shitchi, they're very superficial. He's just doing it because that's what you do. This is what we do. We gotta be frum, we gotta be religious. How do I take off the tithes from salt? There's no obligation to take off tithes from salt. He was just trying to look good. He wasn't doing it for the right reasons. There was no depth to his service of God. He hadn't chosen it. He was born into it. As long as Avram is alive, everything is fine. Everything is great. The moment that Avram dies, so all of a sudden, Avram is the one who really chose it. Avram's gone. All you have is Yitzchak, who wasn't on the level of Avram Avinu, who indeed, when it came to that Kedah, hadn't really chosen it. And so Esav loses even more when Avram passes away. Now Esav, he's not even doing it anymore. He's lost his drive. He's lost his connection, because that example of somebody who was choosing it is gone. And whatever Esav had is gone as well. And so, think about it. Why would everybody look at Yitzchak and say, oh, look, this is the father of that Russia, of that evil person? Don't they know about all the good things? And I believe that perhaps we could say the answer is that there is a reflection on Yitzchak in Esav. Esav is just going off farther and farther away. He hasn't chosen it. And that is a reflection on Yitzchak. Unfortunately, heaven forbid, but that's true. So it's important for us to take out of this idea the great responsibility that we have to ourselves and to our children, that not just to teach, or not just to act, not just to do what's good, or to show our children what they should do that's good, but it's our obligation to give our kids the chance to choose on their own, to learn to make the right choices. Not because we're doing it, not because it's what should be done, but because we are choosing what's right. Not because everyone around us is doing it either, because this is the right thing. We are choosing what's good. We're developing the spiritual strength. We're taking responsibility for our choices and for our avodas Hashem, our service of God. As Rivka said, this is what you did. I didn't do it. Rivka understood this idea. She also had that midah of chesed, that encompassing aspect, just like Avram Avinu. You are choosing this. And that's what she was imparting to Yaakov Avinu. And that's the idea that we need to take to heart. Hashem should bless us to be able to understand this idea and to be able to develop our ability to choose what's right, to develop that ability to recognize that we have the responsibility, and that the more that we develop that ability to do what's right because it's what's the right thing to do because of us, not because of anyone else, Hashem should help us to be able to indeed have a true relationship with Him, a depth of a relationship, and to impart that to our children as well. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.